Oh man, well this is great. Thanks so much for having me. This is fantastic. This is actually the very first prayer breakfast I've ever been to, and so far so good. I thought I've also never spoken this early before, and I was driving in from Waterloo, and about halfway on the drive, it's raining, right? So I'm really trying to concentrate, and then I'm going, "Where's my coffee?" Because I don't have a coffee. So then the speed kind of just started slowly increasing, and I didn't even notice it. And then suddenly I got here and beelined it slowly for the coffee. Actually, that was a shift in my life. So I have a 3-year-old son. And I remember right around the time Faith Tech started was when he was born, which, birthing a child and then a organization at the same time, I do not recommend at all. And I was not a coffee drinker until that happened. And then instantly I was having all these coffee meetings and people were like, "Well, what do you want?" I was like, "Give me the large double, whatever you throw in there, I'm good. I just need a couple of them." So it's a problem. I'm seeking counsel. Any therapists or counselors in the room, come speak with me. But that's actually not a joke. No, that is a joke, slightly. It's actually funny too, I should say, when we talk about technology, hey, you're wearing a Faith Tech t-shirt. Well done, thank you. I often believe when we talk about the concept of technology, I firmly believe there is an opportunity that exists with technology, and then I also believe God views technology as an idolatry, oftentimes in our life. God views technology as both idolatry and opportunity. My mission, and what I'm very passionate about, is I think we vastly misunderstand both of those. So we vastly misunderstand technology as an idolatry in our life. Often people will say to me, I'll mention something, I do work in technology. They're like, "Oh, I have nothing to do with technology." And then I see them in the corner, and they got the phone out, and they're ignoring everybody, and they're just zoned right in. I'm like, "No, you're in technology." We pick this up over 2,000 times a day on average as a society. So there's much more I can say about that. But also on the opportunity side. And for me, reflecting on this event, why we're here, we're talking about praying for Brantford. And I look at the opportunity we have with leveraging technology. And then to me, it's a broader conversation because the things I've learned being in the tech space is working with a lot of highly specialized, unique people. And I think I look at a city, and I look at the city of Waterloo, and then we're in Faith Tech's in Toronto, Vancouver, Chicago, Silicon Valley, so those are the 5 cities we're in. And I see this common thread, which is there's a group of people, and for my space it's technology, but I look at a city broader, and there's all these unique skill sets that exist within a city, right, of people that are passionate and want to do something, but then they just go home and do nothing. And for me, I get really passionate and we say, all it takes is a little bit of better leadership, a little bit of structure, and tying that into what we're deeply passionate about and point them to a better picture. And it's unbelievable what we're starting to see just, again, in the tech space, which I think transfers over into a lot of other sectors. So my hope right now in the time I have with you is to share the story of Faith Tech, and along the way, I want to tell you all these different stories of what I see God doing. But there's a thread that I want to leave you with along that whole way. I'll get to that soon, this one phrase that I hope, because I know tomorrow you're going to wake up and forget 95% of what I told you. But if there's this one phrase that you take away, I hope that that's what sticks with you. So let's start with a picture of something. Can you imagine this with me? Let's imagine we all show up, so it's just you and me, one-on-one, and we go into a coffee shop here in the city. And let's say there's 25, 30 people in the room. So we walk into that coffee shop together, and we look out, and we notice something very strange. We notice that each of the people look downcast, or sad, or depressed, and they've got their heads down. Some people are just eyes closed, but you just sense this darkness in the room. Then you and I find out that every single person in that room, in that moment, is contemplating suicide. My question to you is, what do you do in that moment? What do you do? I'll tell you what you do. You do something, right? Like, you don't just stand there and think, that's unfortunate, that's a devastating thing, I'm gonna leave. You actually do something. So it might be you go one-on-one and you just sit down with one person and you tell them that there's hope. Or you stand up to the whole room and you're like, don't do it. You know, there's so much more to life. Or you run into the street and you're just like, help. I have no idea what to do. You just run in the street and you're like, someone helps. We need reinforcements. We need help. The answer is you do something, right? In that moment, you have to do something. Now, what if I told you that here in Canada, over 8,000 people every single month go on Google and they search this phrase in the search: how to kill yourself. Then what if I told you the top search result is 7 easy, painless ways to kill yourself? And the fourth result down is a YouTube video that shows you how to do it. Which exists. What do you do? I had this amazing honor and privilege near the start of the Faith Tech journey where we ran an event. It's called a hackathon, which is like a retreat for geeks. It's amazing. So we run this hackathon. I stand up and I said, I just found out this problem. I have no idea what to do. So this is what happens. 2 web developers, a communications manager of a charity, and then a guy who was there just to help us set up, heard about this story. He gives up his whole weekend to be a part of this project, just happened to be a psychotherapist. So you got the psychotherapist, communications manager, and 2 web developers. They go, we can do something about that. You know what they did? They bought the domain howtokillyourself.org. And then you go on their website, and instead of 7 easy, painless ways to kill yourself, you know what's at the top? You're not alone. There's a video to watch, there's a phone number to call, there's information on the site. They've been developing this over the last 2 years, and it's unbelievable. Their end mission, number 1. So if anyone searches on suicide online in Canada, they want their website to be at the very top. So right? That's unbelievable. That's a whole shift, though. Think about that. That's a whole shift, right? Because what's happened in all of culture, what did we do, or what have we done with our questions and secrets? In all of history, I'll tell you only one of 2 things. Nothing. I'm not telling anybody, right? I'm taking this secret to the grave, or I'm going to tell someone I profoundly trust that's in my community. What's shifted in the last 30 years? There's a third category, Google. So now we're taking our secrets and our problems to Google. I even have pastors tell me, they're like, I have people come up to me now, and doctors tell me this too. Doctors are like, oh, they went online, and now they think, they know the answer of what to do. It's like, I need to give them this surgery, because apparently that's what, Google told them. And I'm like, you don't need surgery, you need to go back to sleep, that's all you need, But it's this big shift in culture. And that's something we need to observe and recognize. How are we communicating? How are we seeing as culture? So that we look at innovative solutions and we bring it into it. So back to this suicide prevention story, they build this website. And I'm thinking, oh, that's great. That's cool, but is anyone gonna see that website? And then 6 months later, one of the web developers on the team, she calls me. She's like, we gotta sit down for coffee. And I'm like, what's going on? It sounded what's going on. She sits me down. This is her telling the story. She goes, last night, I was out with my friend for coffee. And she said, I started telling my friend about the website I'm building. And she's describing the fonts and the colors. And the friend interrupts her and grabs her arm. And she goes, what's the domain of that website? And she says, howtokillyourself.org. And the friend starts crying. The night before, she went online to figure out how to kill herself. And she said, I landed on that website and saved my life. Last night. And she goes, then I went to the doctor in the morning and I'm starting to get help. I'm like, what is going on? Like, what? So you're telling me you could build a website that helps save lives? And then I spoke at a conference called Urbana, and this young guy, I tell that story, and a young guy comes up to me, and he's kind of like, his head's down, and this is in St. Louis. So his head's down, he comes up to me, he goes, for the last 3 months, my best friend Emma has been in and out of the hospital on suicide, attempting suicide. And he said, 2 weeks ago, she went online again to figure out how to do it, and she said she landed on that website, and everything's changed in the last 2 weeks. And I'm going, this is a website. Like, you can go online, buy a domain for like $7.99. And you could get a good web developer can throw you up a website in like a day with enough content. So this isn't like rocket science, but what it is it's looking at the devastation of what's going on, understanding how culture works and how we're interacting with each other and where we're going with our problems, and saying, what is a new, innovative solution that could help solve that? And 9 times out of 10 right now in our culture, I'm seeing there's some connection to technology. So for me too, I look at technology, and it's not just like it's not just your cell phone. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about technology is revolutionizing even how organizations structure themselves and how leadership works within an organization, how communication works. So this event, this suicide prevention thing, there was like a incredible paradigm shift in my thinking. Because I maybe like you just now, I'd never heard anything like that before. That was crazy. And so all of this started, for me, I was actually at a conference in Toronto about 3 years ago. And there's a guy speaking, and he used his hands a lot, like me. Now you're going to be distracted by it, because I do this a lot. You never noticed that before, did you? But I was just doing this. That's kind of weird. So he's using his hands a lot, so I'm kind of distracted, but I'm paying attention. And then he says this one phrase, and this is the phrase I hope sticks with you, and this is the thread I hope we see. And he said this, and it rhymes, which, okay, it stuck with me, but okay. He says this, in the midst of devastation, there's an opportunity for innovation. You know what's powerful too? This is a preacher, and he was speaking about Jesus on the cross. In the midst of the most horrific act of putting a sinless, non-guilty man on the cross, the most horrific death at the time, came this opportunity for new life, for new things, which is the gospel message. That's it. New life comes out of this horrific act. New things, new opportunities. And what happened for me is I couldn't get this phrase out of my mind, because what happened was a few of my worlds all collided in this statement. So backtrack now 7 years ago. My wife and I celebrated our 10th year anniversary yesterday. So thank you. Brian's like, do you want to stay in Best Western the night before you speak? And I was like, no, not at all. I'll drive in the morning, because that's my 10th wedding anniversary. I'm going to be home. I made the right decision. Although I must say, we woke up, we have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, and our 1-year-old's not sleeping very well at all, so we've been getting up at like 5 a.m. regularly. So we're up at 5 a.m. and she's like, where are you going? Why are you going? We're tired, and I was like, it's okay, it's good. And so I go back, and so a couple of my worlds collide. 7 years ago, my wife and I joined 20 other people to start a church in our city, in Kitchener. And the way we started the church was it's kind of strange, but we went around asking cab drivers where they don't like go in our city. And we had just I just finished my Master's of Divinity. We had just spent 3 months living in South Sudan, where we saw physical heartache. But what ties in with physical heartache is a emotional and spiritual brokenness, 9 times out of 10. And for us in South Sudan we were there for 2 weeks, and everyone looked perfect, because they were used to 2-week short-term mission trip people. And then three came along, they're not going anywhere. And then the walls started coming down. And we saw this group of people that had grown up in refugee camps, grown up in war. And there was just this deep brokenness that came with it. And we thought, how do you have a long-term impact on those on the most margins of our society? And when we got home, we thought the only way we could see that, actually, I'll say this. We started doing parachute charity. And what I mean by that is living in a very comfortable place, going into a impoverished place, doing good deeds for 2 hours, which isn't necessarily bad in and of itself. It's when you leave and you expect that you're actually going to make a big difference in 2 hours. And we started doing that and we realized we weren't. So we said, how do you have a long-term impact in a neighborhood? And so again, we asked cab drivers, we found one neighborhood we kept hearing about, so we moved into that neighborhood. And I gotta tell you a story. So when we went, we did a prayer walk around the neighborhood. And then we went up and there's these 3 high-rise apartment buildings, 80, 60, and 55. So we go up to the lady that's selling the apartment buildings, who works there, and we go, we'd like to hear about more of these apartments. She goes, well, let me go check on the availability. So she goes inside, we're waiting outside, and this older lady comes up to us, and she's kind of like a puzzled look. She's like, what are you guys doing here? Because we're dressed maybe a little differently than the neighborhood, and she's like spotting us out, and she's like, what are you guys doing here? So I kind of explained what we're doing there. She's like, why would you move here? So it didn't make any sense. And so I explained it to her, and she goes, okay. All you gotta do is stay clear of 80. The big apartment building, 80. That's the one where the cops are always at. That's where the drug deals happen. Stay clear of 80. So we're like, okay. So the lady comes back out, and she goes, I got great news. There's an apartment available in 50. It's the quiet one, big hallways. You'll love it. And I because God just had us in this place. And when you get to this place, you just know. And I go, is there anything available in 80? And she's like, I don't know if you just heard me. Like, there's something available in 50. And I was like, we need to be in 80. And she was like so confused. But then we got a place in 80. And we spent 3 years living in that apartment building. We were running a potluck and Bible study, and that grew to the point where we're like, okay, we need a house, but we don't want to leave the neighborhood. And there was only 32 houses that we could buy because there was a large section of subsidized housing, and I was working in business, so we wouldn't have been able to qualify to live in that neighborhood. So there's 32 houses, and none of them were for sale. So we're like, what do we do? So we knocked on doors. So we just go up to the door, and this was the sales pitch. Hi, I'm James. This is my wife, Karen. We live in those apartment buildings. Will you sell your house to us? And here's what happened. Well, confusion, right? And then secondly, every other house gave us a tour. And I'm like, I'm quitting my job. Real estate agent. I'm onto something here. This is amazing, Every other house. And then the Lord provided a house for us. And we moved into that house three years ago in that neighborhood. And the one thing we've learned over the last 7 years in our neighborhood is there is a deep emotional and spiritual, 9 times out of 10, deep emotional and spiritual brokenness that comes with the physical brokenness. So we've journeyed with our friends trying to get out of prostitution. We've journeyed with our friends through dealing with Children's Aid on a regular basis to a slew of different addictions. And the Lord's taught us all along this way that you just need to stay true and stay committed to those people and our friends. I wouldn't even say those people, that's terrible. It's my friends. And so all of this is going on when I hear this phrase, in the midst of devastation, opportunity for innovation. And I'm like, what does that mean? Because I'm understanding the devastation part in my neighborhood, but how could there possibly be opportunity for innovation in this context? So what I did was I started asking people in our city what they thought of this phrase. I'm like, I can't get this rhyming phrase out of my head. What should we do? And what happened was I started meeting all these tech people, because I'm in Waterloo, which last year or 2 years ago was the second highest startup density in the world. next to Silicon Valley. So there's more companies being started in the region of Waterloo per capita than any other city except for Silicon Valley. So you're just like surrounded by entrepreneurs and innovation, and particularly technology. And so I started asking all my tech friends, what do I do with this? And this is when a new problem emerged, which is so fascinating to me. I met all these tech people, and I heard phrases like, I don't know my place in the church, from my tech friends. And I'm going, you don't know. One guy goes, I don't know my place in the church. I'm out for coffee with him. I go, what does that mean? He goes, well, he's a tech guy. It's dead. Yeah, a tech guy. Hello. Oh. We got some tech problems here. Check. Oh, even louder. That's good. Go.
Be free.
Be free. Clearly didn't. Oh, he was getting tired. Stop telling stories, though. What was I saying now? Because that's a great distraction. Oh yeah, tech people. So I'm meeting with this one guy, and he goes, I don't know my place in the church. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, well, I don't want to do public speaking. Tech guy, right? He's like, I'd rather die on my way to doing public speaking, which statistically people are more fearful doing what I'm doing right now than dying, which is like, you'd rather be in the casket than give the eulogy. I'm like, that's a serious problem right there, right? And he's like, I don't want to do public speaking. He's like, and I don't play acoustic guitar. So he's like, what do I do in the church, right? And I was like, well, what do you do now? He's like, I'm a tech guy, PowerPoint, and the website, right? And I go, okay, well, what's your background? He goes, well, I helped invent BlackBerry Messenger. I'm like looking for a camera. I'm like, am I on a TV show? Like one of the most foundational text messaging platforms almost ever built. And I'm with the guy who's one of the 3 inventors of this thing. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. And he's like, yeah. And I'm doing website, PowerPoint. And I'm going, okay. So I said to him, could you build, I just thought of this on the spot when I'm sitting down for coffee, I go, could you build some sort of global platform? I don't even know what that means at the time, like global platform, that unites all the missionaries in the world to share their resources. That seems like a really good thing and really big problem. And I kid you not, that he's a genius. He looks up in the sky for like a minute and a half. That was 5 seconds, and that was awkward. So you could imagine a minute and a half. I'm like, what do I say, right? So then I look up, and I'm like, is there a bird? Or like, is there a ventilation issue? What is this guy looking at? Well, you know what he was doing, right? He was building the platform, because I'm looking for the numbers. I'm like, I've been shooting around in the sky. I don't see it, man. I don't see it. I'm not a genius. And I'm like, they're looking around, because then a minute and a half goes by. He looks down. He's like, yeah, I could build that. And then this was the turning point. I said, don't you? And he goes, this was the turning point for me. He goes, no one ever told me that's a way I can use my gifts and talents for the kingdom of God. Because the whole framework of the church was PowerPoint, website, chairs, set up chairs. If you graduate, that's a big one. Chairs, and then you get this tech guy, you get this tech genius, and you're like, what do we do with that guy? I don't know. Everyone's looking around. I don't know. More chairs, it's like, I don't know. And so I'm so confused, because I'm like, this guy's amazing. How do we utilize these God-given talents and abilities in a unique way to advance the gospel around the world? And I met all these tech people with the same story. I don't know what to do in the church. I don't know what to do with the church. People were even struggling with, why do I work? Why am I in tech? What's going on? And then simultaneously, again, this is all 3 years ago, trying to deal with, in the midst of devastation, opportunity for innovation. I meet all these pastors. Love pastors. But No, I'm just kidding. These pastors, they would say to me, we got all these problems. I'd say, okay, what are you doing about that? Like, I don't know. Chairs, more chairs. And they don't know what to do. And they're like, technology's changing everything. I would even have pastors come to me, they're like, I don't know how to be creative. I'm like, what do you mean you don't know how to be creative? They're like, well, I don't know, can you teach me on creativity? I'm like, what are you doing here? I was like, when was the last time you just spent a day in the woods listening to God? They're like, years? I was like, so technology was shifting leaders and the way they're interacting with the world. There was shifts happening in the world with technology that's rapid pace. Technology is shifting right now, the way we do life. And so I see all these problems in the ministry side. I see all these problems. These tech people are like, oh, I want to solve problems, brilliant problem solvers. And I'm like, hold on a second. So it was early 2016. I'd met maybe 50 people at this time, just for coffees. My wife's like, I have no idea what's going on. Like, why are you meeting all these people? And then I said, why don't we get in a room together? So I booked out the back room of a coffee shop, for 10 to 15 people, thinking this would be incredible. And I messaged all those people and I said, if you want to keep this conversation going, we're going to be at this coffee shop. Well, 35 people show up. And we're like, this is not big enough, this coffee shop. And here's what was amazing about this night. When people came in, we gave them a name tag. And you either were tech, it's like blue for tech, red for ministry, or it's like green for other. It's like, why are you here? I don't know. And then what we did was we put them at tables. And we said, the ministry people need to talk to the tech people. You have to talk to each other. And we put them at tables together, and the most amazing things started happening. The ministry folks and people, leaders within the city, they know the problems that exist in the city, and they would just throw them on the table. I don't necessarily know how to solve this. What do you think? And the tech people are going, fine. This is what I'm good at. That's good. And because for me, also in tech, and there's a lot of other industries that are similar to this, it's not even necessarily them building a website or an app that's most beneficial to society right now. It's the way they think is different. So we'll do these hackathons, right? Retreat for Geeks, it's amazing. But you actually take a huge problem, and in an extremely short amount of time, you can deeply dissect, understand it, and start building solutions for it. And so it's a different way of thinking, and I meet a lot of charities who are about 20 years behind, not just with technology, but in thinking on how to solve problems. And I'm saying, why is Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Amazon, and Apple the 5 most powerful and by market value most profitable companies in the world? What's similar to all 5 of those? They're all tech companies. Never in the history of the world have we seen such influence and power from one industry. Because they're viewing the world differently as well. So we do this event, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on. This is amazing. So we did another one, about 35 people come again. Then we're like, hey, let's do a TED Talk. Those sound cool. So we had 5 speakers come in, do a TED Talk. 160 people show up in Waterloo. I'm looking around, I'm like, there's no name for this yet. Like, I don't even know what this is. Why are people coming? It was showing me there was this kind of deep hunger. And one story that came out of that TED Talk was really neat, and I think applicable even when I think of the city of Brantford, and I think of how do we change cities, transform cities. One of the pastors sits down with me 2 weeks later for coffee, and he went to that TED Talk. And he said, I was in the parking lot with 4 or 5 people from my church. 2 or 3 were in tech. A couple people were just really passionate about this in other industries. And we sat in the parking lot for 45 minutes talking. We were just so inspired. And then the people said to the pastor, well, what do we do now? And he's like, chairs, PowerPoint. That's all the framework he has. So he sits down with me and goes, what do I do with these people? And this is the turning point. I said, what is a problem or an issue that your church is passionate about solving? And in a heartbeat, he says, refugees, supporting and helping refugees, and doing refugee sponsorship. And I said, are there any problems with that? And he laughed, right, in my face, because there's so many. And this is what we did. We gathered a group from his church that are passionate about refugee sponsorship and a group that are in tech in his church. And we had a room of about 30 people at their church. And we said, help us understand what's going on in refugee sponsorship. And then we gave space for the tech people to help solve some of these problems. Well, then we discovered this is way bigger. So we brought in the 5 organizations in Waterloo-Kitchener that are working predominantly in refugee sponsorship. Now, I brought them together and I said, you need to give me your 3 biggest problems. You need to work it out. Give us the biggest 3. So they give us the biggest 3. We held an event at Google. And we called it Refugee Hacknet. And we had about 40-something people show up. And these people, the refugee sponsorship organizations, present the 3 problems. And then we broke up the room into 3 sections. And the technologists got whiteboards out and they just started dissecting the problem and giving solutions to it. And 2 out of those 3 problems continued on as projects to continue helping with these issues. Because when you look at a lot of these issues around refugee sponsorship, for example, there's so many efficiency, communication issues that are being the blockade to getting true, tangible help. And these technologists are going, we can help solve that. I was looking at this big issue. So fascinating to me that that happened. So that's when we did the hackathon right after the TED Talk event. That's where the suicide prevention story came out. I quit my job and I was like, I still don't fully know what this is, but it's something. Because people from other cities were reaching out going, what is this? I was like, I don't know, we got to figure this out together. So then in 2017, we started a faith tech community in Toronto and Vancouver. And we did another hackathon that fall in those 2 cities. And then other crazy stuff started happening. In Vancouver, we had a hackathon, and this lady comes and presents, and she goes, 20,000 people every month, again, this is a similar narrative, go online in Vancouver searching for how to meet up with a prostitute. 20,000. And she said, when you do the results, it's a bunch of garbage. Go here, go do that. And she said, we have to do something. And this team forms, and again, so creative. They go, okay, what could we do? So they buy the domain howtobuysex.com. So I currently own the domain howtobuysex.com, howtokillyourself.org, and faithtech.com. So if anyone looked at the list of my domains, they would definitely arrest me instantly. So that's kind of unique. I haven't really thought about that until now. Is there any police officers? So they buy this domain. They're laughing. Okay, 1 right there. My name's Bill. Oh no, it's right there. Take it down, take it down. So it's amazing. They buy this domain, howtobuysex.com. And they literally looked at how do we create a site that when people search this, point them in a different direction and point them to it's like a sting operation for Jesus. It's amazing. And so this starts happening. And then we do a hackathon in Toronto. And we had the chief information officer of the city of Toronto come and speak. And he starts telling us some of the problems they have. And we discover one of the problems the city of Toronto has is if you're homeless and you go to a shelter and you say, I need to stay here, they'll say, okay, let me check. Well, there's no beds here. And then the person says, well, where do I go? And they go, well, you could go 5 blocks down there, don't know if there's a bed available. You could go 5 blocks down there, don't know. Go 10 blocks down there, don't know. And what was happening was people would go to each, and then it was 2 in the morning, 1 o'clock in the morning. And then they're sleeping on the streets. So we find this problem out. So at our hackathon, we go, here's the problem, what do we do? And this group comes together, and they go, well, what if you could have a system that showed you what's available or not, in which shelter or not? Like a very simple solution. And so they worked on it over the weekend, got the city of Toronto involved, did some initial preliminary work and passed it off to the city, who are now working on it. And this is a group of volunteers who can build this stuff and think about it.
Right.
And before the hackathon, they were sitting at home doing whatever, watching Netflix or playing video games or whatever it was. And now suddenly they're using their gifts and talents, and they're energized and excited about using this for Jesus. Isn't that unique? And I've been looking and I was dissecting this, and it's like, how do you do that? How do you take a group of uniquely talented people? And that, if you're a pastor, that's like, who's in my church? You know, one of the fundamental responsibilities of a pastor is to serve their people by discovering and helping them discover their gifts and talents and pointing towards Jesus Christ. That's a fundamental responsibility of a pastor or ministry leader. And so I look at that and I go, what do you do with the group that might not fit into the mold of how we think to grow churches? And I thought about this, and I thought of a few things. One is, give them big problems, not with your idea of how to solve it. This is really important. This is something I think at a city level you should be doing. And this is when I look at this room and I think, what would it look like for all of you to collaborate on a really big problem the city is having? What would that look like? I'll tell you how it wouldn't look. Take the big problem, you all get in a room and you do something called brainstorming, which is a bad idea. Just saying, here, let's just throw everything at the wall, and then something will just slowly emerge. It's like, this is what Google has dismantled. They've actually proven that the way we do brainstorming right now is highly ineffective compared to other methods. And so there's actually methodology of how you can come up with solutions to big problems that a lot of these tech companies are figuring out ways. So the next time you have a brainstorming session, don't. And look online or email me and be like, what did you say about another way? You could even look up a thing called Google Sprint. There's all sorts of great tools out there on how to do this better. And so I think what you do is you find a way to collaborate and you say, here's the biggest problem. Let's find people who are great problem solvers. And that's probably not you. You're not as smart as you think. It's true. Find someone else that thinks about these things all the time and throw that problem on the board and then start looking at possible solutions. And then find ways to collaborate. Look at the skill sets of each church, each organization. How can everyone uniquely contribute to this massive problem? The other one is you need structure and leadership in this place. And I know you're going to hear that and you're like, well, that's like the most fundamental thing. That's kind of silly. But I hear a lot of these things was like, how do you solve a problem? They're like, oh, it's going to be organic. It's going to be organic. It's going to organically flow into a solution. Never seen that happen. An organic flow solution. It takes leadership and structure. And I'll tell you one thing I've learned about the tech community is when you give them lovingly good leadership and you give them enough structure to be dangerous and then release them to the hounds, it's incredible. Just solve this problem and here's some support to do it. And then the third thing is do it in such a way that's fun. So this is what these hackathons are all about, right? Retreat for Geeks. Essentially what we do in a hackathon is you take a really big problem and in one weekend, from a Friday night to a Sunday afternoon, you have to figure out that problem and come up with at least a prototype solution of how to solve that. And then we do presentations on Sunday afternoon, we award winners. And I'll tell you why I don't think a hackathon concept is just for the tech community. What you do in that very short amount of time is you accelerate the ability to solve a problem rapidly because you're putting a time constraint on it and you're uniquely figuring out who you need on a team to do it. You know, so that's even a lesson of like, how do we figure out how to solve some of these big problems? Well, maybe, and I wrote this down, what if we did Hack Brantford? Like I'd throw hashtag on it, I don't know why, I think, anyway, you'll get people hashtagging out. But I called it hashtag Hack Brantford. And you get the city involved, and you figure out what are the biggest 2 or 3 problems we're having in the city. And then you say, anyone who wants to help solve this, we need technical people, we need communications people, we need psychotherapists. Come for a weekend, and we're going to figure out in a very short amount of time, hyper-intensive, figure out how to solve some of our biggest problems. And you may not solve them in that weekend. That's not the point. The point is to get the right ideas starting off, and then you can leverage it from there. I'm probably done soon, so I'll finish with something. That sounded very like I have no idea where I'm going with this, which is partially true. But no, I'm just kidding. I want to come back then and finish with this. In the midst of devastation, there's an opportunity for innovation. We were just talking at our table, the Massey Ferguson plant. What year was that when that left the city? 79? So 79, 82, somewhere in there. Let's call it 81. 80 and a half. That's when it happened. So I'm just learning this now, right? What did that do? So the plant shuts down in your city, and you lose thousands of jobs. Devastating, right? Devastating for a short time and for a time. But as I learned at the table, what's come out of it? You've had to diversify as a city. You've had to grow new industries and work on new industries. You've had to figure out another way. I was just in Chicago last week, and in 1871, there was a massive fire in Chicago that literally pretty much dismantled the whole city. And what came of that was some of the most beautiful innovation. They built a system on how the city operates completely differently. Other cities from all around the world stepped up to help them. And they reimagined the city. And now one of the big tech centers in Chicago is called 1871, as a reminder that in the midst of that brokenness and devastation, there's an opportunity to innovate. So for me, I look at that and there's two applications. One is at a city level. What's broken down in the city? Don't woe over it, because nothing gets done that way. Look at it and be like, what could that be? What's the opportunity that could come out of that? And at the level of the individual, it's so true. In the midst of devastation, there is an opportunity for innovation. My daughter was born a year ago, and she was born 3 months early. She was literally 2 pounds. So I held her, and it was from my pinky, was her bum, and up to my thumb was her head. Literally the size of my hand. And every doctor said she shouldn't survive. My wife was in and out of the hospital for the 3 months before this happened. And when she was born, it was unbelievable. A miraculous birth took place. And I look at that and I go, thank God for modern technology. Because 30 years ago, my daughter was dead. And I look at that and I go, what in the midst of that devastating act, was there an opportunity for new things? And here's what happened. My faith has never been so strengthened than in that season of suffering. Than in the season of suffering. And Scripture talks about this. Glory or rejoice in suffering, because it produces perseverance, produces character, produces hope. So we look at that and we go, no, that's okay. In the midst of suffering, that's okay, because there's opportunity for new life. And then just last weekend, we had a whole big party in our tech space in Waterloo for my daughter Anna. A bunch of our friends come out, and about 25% of the room didn't know Jesus, because it was intentionally we wanted to tell her story of what God did in her story to help people see the gospel. And now we're starting to have these interactions with people that have never really talked to us about faith, that are now talking to us about Jesus. And it was because of the horrific act and the suffering that we went through that Jesus brought about new things and new innovation. So I'm talking on a personal level as well here. In the midst of your suffering, in the midst of your devastation, have hope, because I actually believe, grounded in the gospel and in Jesus Christ, it's an opportunity for new things, new innovation.